hello, everyone. With pandemic and us being in Zoom, you can't see faces, you can't see smiles or frowns or whatever it is. But I want to, before we jump into anything, first of all, thank Philadelphia Fight for the opportunity to share and just kind of be here with you guys and hold space for you as we talk through the holidays and the blues that come with it. Or is that even a thing? We're going to talk about that. We're going to identify that. So I am one of several presenters for the month, and we're kind of doing it together. So I'm your first, and then we'll kind of talk about the other presenters that are going to come after me. But by the end of this, we're going to figure out is the holidays blues really even a thing, okay? So I like to connect with people and I like to make sure we're all here. So I'm going to ask you guys to do me a really big favor if you can. I'm going to ask you to put in the chat box either a 1 or a 2. So I'm going to give you some instructions. And so here we go. So I want you to put a 1 in the chat box if you have recently experienced a loss. Put a 1 in the chat box if you have recently experienced a loss. All right, I see them coming in. Thank you guys so much for sharing. Wow, okay. I want you to put a 2 in the box if you know someone close to you who is struggling with managing their feelings and emotions over a loss. I want you to put a 2 in the box if you know someone who is struggling with managing this thing called grief and loss. All right, I see the numbers are coming in. And then lastly, I want you to put a 3 in the box if you are on the other side where you work with people who are experiencing losses and you're helping them to manage and kind of cope with some of the things and the nuances that comes with it. All right, great. So this kind of gives me an idea of who's in the room with me today. I am a therapist and I work with people who experience all kinds of losses, and we'll talk about some of those different kinds of losses. And also I am a human and I have also experienced major losses in my life. And I think we can agree that the pandemic has caused us all, like if we never experienced a loss before, the pandemic has caused us all to experience a loss on some level. And if that is you, put a 5 in the box. Put a 5 in the chat box. If this pandemic kick rocks and has caused you to lose something either dear to you, secondly removed, thirdly removed, if you just lost anything in this pandemic, put a 5 in the box. Now I could put a 5 for a couple of things that I've lost since the pandemic happened. So, all righty, let's go on. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to talk through a little bit. So my disclaimer is that when technology works, it works. And when it doesn't work, it doesn't. But let's cross our fingers that it is going to work for us today. All right, so here we go. 1 second. All right, so when I was coming up with the title, I was like, there's a destination that we all get to in this journey, right? Because that's what journeys are like. There's an end, right, in this journey. But as I was putting the PowerPoints and the presentation together, I started thinking like, is there really a destination? So we're going to determine if there is such a thing. Is there a destination, or is this journey that we're constantly on? Maybe it looks different today than it's going to look next month, or it's going to look into the 3 years. So we'll chat a little bit about that. So before we get started, I am becoming a doggy lover. I'm trying to convince my husband that we should get a dog, but that's not quite working, but that's okay. I'm going to use my doggy skills today. And I want you guys to, I'm going to take 3 people. If you can unmute yourself and share with me, looking at the doggy pictures, how are you feeling today? How are you doing? What's going on with you today? Where are you today? I'll take 3 people. Well, I'll go first. So I am a 7. I'm between a 6 and a 7. And the 6 is I'm super happy and excited to be here. And the 7 is I'm just in chill mode. And so with the chill mode, that just means, I'm going with the flow for today. It's Monday, it's brisk out, but it's not raining, it's not snowing, the sun is out. So I'm just excited about that. So what you guys could do is use your chat option and just kind of put your numbers of where you are today. If you want to share why you're there, you can go ahead and do so. If not, just put the number in. And I do see them coming in. Great. Awesome. Nice. All right. All right. Now, this may change for some of you, right? It may, the feeling, the dog scale may change by the end of this or not. So just be mindful of your emotions. And I want you guys to take care of yourself. And what I mean by that is, if this becomes too much for you, you don't have to stay. The great thing is that this is being recorded. So when you are ready and able and willing, come back and view it. You don't have to stay if it's too painful for you. You don't have to stay if emotions are coming out of the woodworks, out of nowhere. So I want you guys to keep that in mind, because we're going to do self-care. We're going to take care of ourselves, because if we don't, then we can't be there for ourselves, let alone the people that we help, the people that we interact with throughout the day. And so I'm a big advocate for self-care. So if this becomes too much, it's okay. Drop out, okay? You can come back, you can watch it. The video will be made available. So today we're going to talk about grief. We're going to look at the journey. We're going to talk about the destination, if there is such a thing. And then we're going to end with ways to cope during the holidays. And this is kind of going to be the theme for the next couple of weeks. So we're going to keep building. So this is going to be our foundation, and we're going to build and build on top of this as we go along. So what is grief? We hear this all the time. We probably have experienced it. As you guys were putting your 1s, 2, and 3s in the box, it was evident that, yes, we have all on some level experienced some kind of grief. But it's a very strong and sometimes overwhelming emotion that comes up for us, whether there's sadness that stems from a loss of someone, or from a terminal diagnosis. And even if it's been something we've lost, it may not have been a person, but it could have been something very dear to us. It could have been, a means of living to us. It could have been a place where we were once living, that we lost. So grief is a strong emotion attached to the loss of things that are very close to our heart, very dear to us, or people who are very close to our hearts are very dear to us. Vicki Harrison has this quote out, and she says, grief is like the ocean, right? It comes in waves, ebbing, and sometimes the water is calm, and sometimes it is overwhelming. But all we have to do is learn to swim. It doesn't mean that on one day we're going to be like the best swimmer or the worst swimmer. We just have to keep swimming. Put a 1 in the chat if you have experienced times where, you've been okay, and out of nowhere, this overwhelming feeling comes over you that leads to no more calmness, right? It's like this wave that comes and hits you. Put a 1 in the chat if you have experienced that at any point in time in your grief process. So can we pause on grief or not? Because I would love to hit that remote and be like, boop, I'm not ready, I can't manage, I can't deal today. But only if we could hit the pause button would our grieving process through the holidays be on hold until it's over. But the way life works, right, is that we just can't. Life happens, those feelings and emotions come over us, and we cannot necessarily put the pause on there. A couple of years ago, I had a major, major, major loss in my life. And it happened on New Year's Eve. Now, we all know New Year's Eve is like this time where we get out, we party, we bring in the new year, we spend time, for most people, with loved ones, and we're excited to embark on the next year that's coming, and all of the things that we set aside that we're going to do, all the goals that we set up. So to lose someone for me on that day was devastating. And all I needed was to just wake up. I thought I was dreaming. I was like, I can't be going through this loss on New Year's Eve. So I remember wishing I could just hit this pause button so that I didn't have to experience it. I felt I was too young. Well, is it really an age? But I felt I was too young to experience such a major loss in my life. And for many New Year Eves after the loss, it's been fresh. The feelings still come, the thoughts still come, everything is just right there for me. And so it doesn't necessarily just go away with time. And we'll talk about how we can begin to sort of adjust and readjust so that we get some new adapting in life as we go on living. So grief, death, loss, it's just all complicated. And it's so complicated and unique at the same time because everyone's experience is so different. I remember when I had my loss, there were other people who was close to this very person who passed away, and we all was experiencing different things. And so when we're in a family, and let's just use death, for example, and we experience a death of a lost one in the family, it is going to be common for members of the family to have a unique experience related to the grieving process, to feel differently. Maybe one person may look like they're not even moved by the passing of this one family member, where another person may look like life can't even go on without this family member. So we all have complicated and uniquely feelings, emotions associated with grief. So it's not easy to say, just accept it, move on with time. This is something we carry with us forever. And that's part of why I left the blank in front of destination, because we get to determine what that looks like. For some of us, it looks like we're always on this path. For some of us, it looks like we've hung it on the shelf, and every now and then we pull it down from the shelf and we look at it, we share memories, we laugh, we cry. And when we're done, we close it back up and we put it back up there. So it's not, there's no like final destination that everyone will experience. We're all on this journey together, but there's so many different roads, and those different roads lead to so many different places. And so as we're thinking about it, as we're thinking about grief, it's always evolving. And at times it feels like, and it may even seem like for others, that it's out of control and it's out of our control. We have no control over it. I don't know about you guys. As a matter of fact, let me see if I'm alone. Put a 1 in the chat box if you have some challenges with relinquishing control. Put a 1. Because for some of us, sometimes the fact that we cannot control the feelings and emotions that comes is like out of our control. There's nothing we can do with it. I remember I had to switch my route when my person passed away, because every time I would get to this particular light on this road, out of nowhere, I would just bust out and start crying. Now, you would think I would know, right, that this light is coming up. Oh, I'm on this road and this light is coming up. But I would always try to be in control. Like, I could do this. I'm strong. I can't believe death has a hold on me like this. And sure enough, every time I would get up to that light, because at that light, there was a time where we had this amazing conversation and we were talking about all the things we wanted to do in the upcoming year. And in that upcoming year, when this person died, all those things died with them. Excuse me. I want you to put a 1 in the box if you've experienced anything like that. Have you had to change your routines? Have you had to move? Have you had to, add more supports in place for you, because without the additional support, it just seemed very difficult to continue with? So because of all of this, right, there is no way that the pause button is going to work. Because if the pause button works, then what does that mean? I have control. And as we're talking about, because of the complication of grief, there is no way that we have control over that. So we almost have to decide one or two things. We're either going to go through the motions now, or we're going to go through the motions later, but we're going to go through the motions at some point. Does that make sense to you guys? Put a 1 in the chat box if it makes sense. Put a 2 in the chat box if it doesn't make sense to you. While you guys are doing that, let's talk a little bit about some of the signs that are associated with unresolved grief. And when we talk about unresolved grief, we're talking about grief that has just that, been unresolved. We have not tackled it, or if we started to tackle it, these are some of the things that are popping up. These are the symptoms that we start to experience. And I'm not just talking about in general, I'm talking about directly related to the loss, right? So these are signs that should tell us, hey, maybe we should talk to someone about what's going on. Maybe we should talk to someone about how much this person or this thing that I've lost meant to me, because I'm noticing my anxiety is up. I'm noticing I'm just a little bit more short with people. Maybe I'm just angry and I can't figure out why. Maybe I can't sleep. I'm having a hard time falling asleep, or I'm having a hard time staying up. Maybe I'm just overly sad. So my sadness is not typical. It's just like I can't go through my day without feeling sad. Maybe I'm just crying a lot, right? I'm watching, a funny movie or a sitcom, and where I should be laughing, I am crying. Or best yet, maybe I'm just going through the motions, like I'm just living life and just going through the motions because I have to. I'm not present in the day-to-day stuff. I can't focus. I can't concentrate. Things that were of interest to me before are no longer an interest to me. And so these are some of the symptoms. If you are experiencing any of these symptoms, I want you to find someone you trust. Find someone that you can talk to, even if it's just to check your thinking. And what I mean by that is, hey, can we just chat a little bit? Because I'm experiencing boom, 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 and I'm not quite sure, is this normal? Should I be experiencing these things? Should I be alarmed about these things? So find a trusted individual that you can talk to about some of these symptoms to help you map out if this is a part of your grief. Maybe it isn't, maybe it's related to something else, but check your thinking on it. If that makes sense to you, hit a 2 in the chat box. Put a 2 in the chat box if that makes sense to you. All right, so there are some symptoms that may be more than emotional. We just talked about the emotional ones, but what about those ruminating thoughts, those intrusive memories of the lost, and then memories of past celebrations? It comes back, right? You probably think about, let's go with Thanksgiving. So 2 years ago, my mother-in-law passed away, and she was like the cook. When I tell you, like the cook of the family. And so she died in October, and then Thanksgiving rolled around, and we were like, wait a minute, does anyone have her recipes? What are we cooking? So Thanksgiving was like, we all cooked, but it wasn't the same because she did all the cooking. So Thanksgiving for the last 2 years have never been the same. And although I think about her all the time, it's particularly around Thanksgiving when I'm like, man, that mac and cheese that she used to make, I haven't been able to like clone it. No one has been able to clone it. Her sweet potato pies, like we would have sweet potato pies for days. Like you could, she would tell you to put it in the freezer and keep it and then reheat it. But her turkey, all of those things. And so if I forget her, which I haven't, when it comes towards the holidays, it's like brace myself, right? Because I know I'm going to miss her food. I know I'm going to miss her fellowship. And so the holidays tend to kind of make it more, just a little bit more of a feeling that becomes more intense, possibly than it had been throughout the year. So let's talk about this line. And I'm going to actually stop sharing for a second. And I want us to talk about this line in the chat. So do you guys think, talk to me, text to me, type to me, I don't know. Do you guys think that there is such a thing as a destination in the grief process. And maybe you have reached your destination. And so if you have, share that if you feel like it. But do you think that there is? So that's yes, you think that there is a destination, excuse me, in the grief process, or no, there isn't. Yes, there is a destination. We all will arrive, or no, it's just something that continuously continues to sort of follow us throughout life for the rest of our lives. I see one no, another no. Is there a destination? Where are we headed on this journey? Do we, when we put in our GPS, what do we put in our GPS so that we can begin the journey? Did we put anything in there? Are we just driving, you know, hoping that at some point we will arrive? And then another webinar is, what does it mean to even arrive, right? So most people are saying that no, there is no destination. We just continue to go through the process. See, I told you, when technology works, it works. And then when it doesn't, it doesn't. So all right, well, I don't have my PowerPoint to continue to share, but let's keep going. So when we talk about this, where we're going to end up, it doesn't go away with time, right? When we're talking about grief, when we're talking about loss, what happens is as time passes, the experiences really change and it morphs. So if you've experienced multiple losses in your life, put a 1 in the box if this statement makes sense to you, that in time, while it didn't go away, it just changed, or maybe it became easier to manage not having the person or the thing with you. So maybe if rather than thinking about grief as a destination, can we perhaps think of it as it's just a journey? It's just this road that we're on. And on this road, I'm going to experience multiple things, right? I'm going to see some trees, I'm going to see some beautiful flowers, and I'm just going to see flatlands. I'm going to see hills and mountains. Is that something we can agree on? If you think that's kind of what your journey has been and is looking like, put a 1 in the box for me. And as we're thinking this through, there are various types of grief. And I know I've mentioned some like loss of things or loss of people, but there is no singular loss that triggers grief for just any person. I mean, if I ask you guys to tell me all the things you've lost since you were a child, we would probably be here till tomorrow collectively. My first loss was when I left elementary school and I went into middle school. That was the first time friends I had for 5 years didn't go with me to the next grade. Some of us went to specialized schools and we kind of split up at that time. But as a kid, you don't think of that as a loss, right? You just think, okay, well, I'll either see them around or I won't, and you just move on to your next set of friends. But as an adult, and I started thinking back on some of the times that I've experienced, excuse me, grief and loss, I had that friend, Jennifer, who we used to sit next to each other in class, and we kind of went through 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade together. Till this day, I don't know where Jennifer, I don't even know where Reagan is. Like, I've been thinking about those friends that I went to school with, elementary school, that we just parted ways. And so in addition to losing people that we care about, we also experience things, losses that cause us some grief as well. In this pandemic, some of us have lost jobs. Some of us have lost friends. Some of us has lost family. I mean, the list can go on. There's been some new things. Some of us have even lost our sense, the sense of who we are. If you really think about it, are you the same person today that you were before the pandemic? Are you trying to still find your way? So there's been quite a few variations of grief as we have sort of trickled along the way. So when there's a change, when things evolve, I'm sorry, it becomes a little bit more complicated because it's like a hiccup and then a start over. So it's like, what do I do without this thing or this person? What does life look like without this thing or this person? And the days continue to go, right? So we continue to wake up and experience life and go through life without the person or the things. And so many things can trigger, our grieving or our sense of grief. There are some scenarios that people have lost pets. There's others that a sense of injustice or recovery from injustice. There have been people who have had miscarriages, people who have infertility issues, people who have lost secure housing or even stable, in employment. The list of things that we lose is a long list. Some people, they're affected by it deeply, and others, it's like, okay, well, that was a loss. I'm gonna take one on the chin and keep moving. But not everyone is there. Not everyone experiences that. That's what makes this process so unique. That's what makes, the grieving and the loss of people so unique, because each of us, based on our experiences in life, we respond and react differently. Does this make sense? If it makes sense, put a 1 in the chat. If it doesn't make sense, put a 2 in the chat. Some of the things that happens also is that we talked about sleep. Excuse me. And sometimes we find it hard to sleep. In my loss, it was my previous husband. He died in his sleep. So for me, sleep was like a thing that didn't happen because I was afraid that I would die in my sleep too. Now, I knew better then, and I still know better now, but even though I knew better then, it didn't prevent me from not wanting to fall asleep. But my mom used to tell me this thing. She goes, sleep has no mercy. At some point, those eyelids are going to get so heavy that you could barely keep them up and you're going to fall asleep. And when that would happen and I would realize that I was sleeping, I would quickly jump up. I would wake up, I would find something to do, I would get some coffee or whatever I could. But then again, the same process happens. So for some of us, it's hard to fall asleep. That was my hard to fall asleep. But for other people, just the thoughts that ruminate through your minds, the memories, all of those things sometimes is enough to keep us awake. And then there's the whole thing with our energy. We don't have the energy to do anything because we're not getting enough rest. We're not getting enough sleep. And so sleep for some of us is a major thing when it comes to grief and loss. All of the responses that you have gone through, all of the reactions that you have felt, all of the feelings, all the emotions, those are valid. It's hard for anyone to say, and my biggest pet peeve is, oh, you're still grieving? Like, yes. And I will grieve until I feel I'm not grieving. And it's that until my death day, then so be it. But there are people who they love us. They want to see us how we used to be, happy, whatever. And they see the impact the death has had on us. And all they want is for us to just be better. They don't know how to say it any differently. So sometimes they say things that does not sound right. They say things that may cause us to raise an eyebrow, but they don't know what to say. And they're trying in their own way to be there for us. And so let me just tell you that your feelings are valid. Your responses are valid. Death hurts. It's like, I'm going to date myself. So in the 80s, we had a wooden center table in the middle of the living room. Now, if you guys understand where I'm going with this, just please help me feel better about my age and put a 1 in the box. This wooden, sometimes it was a glass table, but it was like the center table, and it was like part of the furniture, like decor in the living room. And if you know anything about these tables, they don't move. They're always there. For us, they were there for years, right? But we would still somehow hit our pinky toe on the side of the table, the leg of the table. And when I tell you the pain associated with that was, for me, enormous. It was huge. I cried and it stayed, it lingered. The pain lingered for some time. I always say that for me, that's what death is like. It's like, I know it's coming because death is a part of life. Like, I don't know anyone who has lived forever and forever and still living, but whenever it comes, I'm just never prepared for it. You know, even if with my mother-in-law, the doctors told us, they said she has 6 months to live. They gave her 6 months to live. And literally in month 6, she died. And even when they sent her home on hospice, it still was like when she died, like, wow, you know, and call it hope, call it whatever you want to call it. But there was this thing that she could beat this, or this thing like, yeah, the doctor said 6 months, but what do they know? Mind you, they're doctors. Well, what do they know? Mind you, there's tests and results and all. So when it comes to death, it is very painful. Whether or not we hear, we see, we feel it coming, it doesn't take the edge off of the pain that we feel when it does hit. So essentially, there's no right or wrong way to grieve. There's no right or wrong way to do this thing called grief and loss. Many of us do what we do because it's what we've always done. Whenever there's like a crisis, whenever there's a trauma, whenever there's something that shakes us off of our core, we have this go-to thing that we do. Now, when those things though become concerning, or I'm just going to call it a yellow flag, because maybe it's not a red flag right now, that we find someone that we trust to check our thinking. Like, so I've been doing X, Y, and Z, and I don't know if it's healthy for me. I don't know if I should try something else. Do you have any suggestions? Or if you see someone who you think might be going through it, the simple question of, how can I hold space for you? What can I do that could help alleviate some of the pressure, some of the pain that you're feeling? And I'll tell you, they may not even know, but that question resonates. Sometimes it's just sitting with them and not even saying anything. Sometimes it's just being present and not even doing anything. But how can we show up for people in our community? How can we show up for each other as we're dealing with the grief and loss that's coming, or that's here, or people have experienced? So I like to think of, I have a 5-year-old daughter who everything is instant. She wants it now. Like, there's no waiting, there's no hold on. It's like now. And I think of like the microwave, right? Like when I'm hungry, I don't want to heat up my food on the stove. I want to put that on a plate, stick it in the microwave, boom, 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 and it beep, beep, is done, right? And I think that's kind of how we operate sometimes, is that we want to get quick results. We're looking for quick ways to seek out how we can end the painful feelings or experiences that are associated with grief and loss. But this has been the one thing for me that it's on its own time frame. Like, I don't have control over this, because while my first major loss was about 10 years ago, I still at times feel like it's very fresh. Every December, I have to brace myself for what's coming on December 31st. And it's to the point where the people around me, they're always talking about, okay, so December 31st is coming up. What are we going to do? How are we going to show up for her? Because I have asked them, I'm like, listen, I don't know what I need. I don't know what I want, but I do know that I don't want to be alone, whatever that means, right? And so there's been conversations over the years about when something is done and it helps to say, oh yeah, that thing right there, someone write it down, because we're getting old. We're not going to remember this in 10 years. But write that thing down, because I remember it made me feel good. So because it made me feel good, I want to keep doing it. So both of us trying to manage and be in sort of the realm of life, because we still have to live, we still have to work, we still have to pay bills, we still have to do all of these demands that life has on us while we're dealing with the grief, while we're trying to manage the loss. And so If you have experienced any of the things I'm talking about, I need you guys to talk back to me by putting a 1 in the box. Let me know that you're with me. Give me a thumbs up, whatever you got to do to let me know that you understand that and you have or know someone who has been just where I am, was, and will be. A 1 in the box. Am I alone in this? Am I the only one? Thank you, guys. See, I knew I had some friends that were riding with me today. Yes, thank you. It's been tough. It's been hard. And the pandemic didn't make it easy because for me, I thought I was like getting over the hump. And then the pandemic happened. And then I was right back to like, wait, I can't see my friends. I can't go out. I have to be in the house for how long? I have to put what on? So it was like this ripple effect of things for me. So I was losing and grieving what life used to be before the pandemic. So not only had I lost people, but now I had also lost what life was and the uncertainty. And I think when we talk about that control piece, the uncertainty of not having, the uncertainty of not knowing what's coming causes some of those anxieties. So we're on this journey, people will say that they don't feel that you'll ever get over it. I will say for me, it's been 10 years. I haven't gotten over it. I've just learned ways to approach my grief that's a little bit different. And I want us to talk a little bit about that. I want us to talk about how the journey does change over time. The concept, gives us room to grow because it's not, oh, I don't have to end this. Like, I'm not heading to a destination where it's done with. I'm over this thing. No, we just learn how to manage it a little bit differently. So as it's a journey, I want you guys to kind of think about what would it mean to honor those feelings? What would it mean to honor those emotions that you're experiencing over it? Can you sit in it? Can you hold space in it for yourself? And rather than willing or wishing it away, can we learn to accept that it's just one piece of the experience of being alive, right? Can we get to a place where we can accept that it's one piece of the experience of being alive? And so we know it's inedible, like it's coming with it. Again, I said, I don't know anyone that has lived forever and a day. And so we know that grief and loss is a part of the process in the human experience. And we know too that there are feelings that are that we will experience around grief and loss. So when we think about how do we cope, right? We're at the holidays, Thanksgiving just came and now we're at Christmas and, all of the different holidays that comes in December. And I've watched people in the last couple of maybe weeks not be as excited about the holidays as we used to be. But then I've also seen some people be overexcited about the holiday, trying to find their new norm, trying to find, this new place where they can land, that the holidays look different for them. But there's a lot of pressure over the holidays. I mean, hence why we're even doing this whole thing about grief and loss during the holidays, because there's this overwhelming sense of pressure that happens. And for me, it was people wanted to take me out. People wanted me to go places, and I didn't want to do any of those things. And year 1 to 3, I did them because people were like, it'll help. It didn't help. So year 4 on, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'm not doing that. No, we're not going to do that. I don't want to. I just rather be alone. I just rather go to church. I just rather watch a movie. So I started in my journey kind of figuring out what I needed and what I wanted. And I started telling people that, right? Because at some point or another, the pressure for me got too much. If you think the pressure of like going to the holiday gatherings, the family gatherings, especially after losing someone or something, is too much, put a 1 in the box. Put a 1 in the box if you think sometimes the pressure is just too much of, you have to be on. Yeah, I just lost someone. I just lost something. but I have to be on, whether you have to be on for little kids, whether you have to be on for your spouse, whether you have to be on for your job. And so the pressure of it just becomes a little bit too much. So a couple of things, and I will make my slides because I don't have to show available to anyone who wants them. So you don't have to rush to write them down, but these are some key concepts. Tracy says flares up in her immune system. That is an excellent point, Tracy, because grief and loss sometimes shows up differently for us. We usually talk about the emotional aspects that come with it, but there are some physical aspects that comes with it too. So yes, the flaring up in the immune system is definitely one of those things. So as we go through coping, you guys get to set the boundaries with holiday events. And that word boundaries is a big B, and it's a big word, right? Because outside of grief and loss, there are several of us that struggle with setting boundaries to begin with, right? So like, if that's a thing that we already struggle with, it's going to be hard to set those boundaries even around holiday events. But that is a thing. You get to decide what you want to commit yourself to and what you don't want to commit to. It's also okay to opt out or go to certain things or put a time limit on it. Maybe you're not going to stay for the whole time, but you just show your face, or you go for a couple of hours. And when you feel you're ready to leave, then you leave. Even if you get there and you're like, yeah, you look around the room, you're like, okay, deuces, I'm out, then that's it. But you have to remember, protect you, self-care, take care of yourself. So setting boundaries at holiday parties is one. There also is a sense of wanting to and the need to find balance between engaging in the holiday events and pushing yourself also. So there's a balance of engaging and then pushing yourself to attend. So some of these holiday events are holiday parties, family gatherings, holiday shows. Just remember, as you're planning things or people are planning things for you, to check in with your wants and your needs to identify your readiness, right? Because you may not be ready for all those things right now, or you may be ready for some of them. But communication with the people that you're sort of chatting about these events with is going to be key for you. The next thing in coping with the grief and loss during the holidays is really important, and I call it lean in to your emotions. Leaning in, like sit with it a little bit, think about it a little bit. I have a timer. I set my timer like, you know what? Clearly you want us to have this grief today, so let's decide how long it's going to be. And sometimes it's 10 minutes. A couple of weeks ago, I took a mental health day because I just was thinking about life and just thinking about the things I've lost and the people I've lost, and I just couldn't go to work that day. So I sat home and watched Lifetime TV all day long. And I was happy by the end of the day, but I needed that because I felt like I was in the hustle and the bustle of working, and it was just creeping up on me slowly. And then I was like, oh, December's coming. And for me, that's usually what happens. Like, I'm like, why is this going on? Why am I? And I'm like, oh, I get it. Yes, December's coming. So know your readiness. Lean into those emotions and those feelings, because you can put them on the shelf or you can avoid them or not bother with them, but it doesn't go away just because of that. Does that make sense to you guys? Put a 1 in the chat box if you understand what I mean by leaning into your emotions. All right. So during the holidays, it may be tempting to be numb. We may then shop, we may drink, we may use drugs, we may do all these things to avoid those feelings and emotions during the holiday. So anticipating difficult emotions and preparing ahead of time also helps to prevent some of the negative consequences that could occur. Because oftentimes when we indulge in those negative consequences or those negative behaviors, the consequence, it takes us longer to get out of it than it took us to get in it. Again, that trusted person, find your person that you can talk to about some of the things that's happening. Check your thinking. Okay. I'm using that term. I'm not saying therapy. I'm not saying go to therapy. I'm not saying find a therapist, but I'm saying find a trusted person that you can talk to check your thinking. And in checking your thinking, you're asking, like, does this make sense to you? Should I be looking at this at a different angle? Are these yellow flags? Are these red flags? What's happening? Help me figure it out. That's what that trusted person can be and do for you. So plan ahead to fill empty holiday roles, right? Because my family didn't do that. We didn't think to get recipes from my mother-in-law so that we could cook. And so when Thanksgiving came, no one wanted to make the phone call of like, so who's bringing what? Because she would call us and say, I'm bringing boom, boom, boom. I need you to bring this, you to bring that. She had it all organized. So we were spoiled. So we just would show up with whatever she told us to bring. Well, the year that she passed, we showed up with like store-bought stuff. Nobody really cooked. The meal wasn't appetizing, because we didn't think to plan ahead because we were so thick in our grief that we didn't realize Thanksgiving was boom right upon us and we were not prepared. So if at all you can, plan ahead, fill the role of the person, because that role for many of us was important, but we didn't think to fill it because who would think that? So I'm here to tell you guys, think it, fill it, because it just takes the edge a little bit off of the grieving process. Honor old traditions, and then honor memories. So when my mother-in-law passed, we decided to cancel Thanksgiving. We was like, we're not going to do this because it would be too painful for us all to be in the same room and she's not here. So her oldest daughter said, no, we're not going to. She wouldn't want us to. Well, when she said that, we were like, oh yeah, you're right. She wouldn't want us to. So we then showed up. And it was difficult to talk about her, but then we started saying, remember when, and it was all funny stories, or like when, one year I made the mac and cheese and I wanted to experiment with the mac and cheese. So I put something in the mac and cheese that I thought would be great, but it was like the worst. And so we laughed about that because we laughed about the one thing she gave me to do. And she was like, well, at least I don't have to make the mac and cheese. I went to experiment and it was horrible. And so we laughed about it. And so we started just talking about memories of her, or Black Friday at 3:00, some insane hour standing on like a Walmart line to get like what, God knows what, right? So honor old traditions and honor the memories, because that's how you keep the person with you. That's how you keep the person present. And then in the meantime, create new ones. What are you guys going to do now differently than what you were doing before, but still holding space for the person who has passed? If you think about your loved ones, they would have wanted for you to have a holiday. They wouldn't want you to not enjoy it. They would want you to enjoy the holiday. So acknowledge that things have changed and that you have some challenging feelings that are very validated. And some of it could be feelings of guilt that arises because in this process, how dare me have fun, right? I'm supposed to be sad. I'm supposed to be grieving. I see Tracy put in here that we kept the chair empty for my glam mom and watched videos for glams watched video glams with the party. Her funeral was a celebration and we kept a bottle. That's what I'm talking about. Yes. Pink Moscato, just how she told us before she passed. I love that. Honoring the person's wishes, right? And making sure that you do that, because my mother-in-law also said to us, don't cry for me now. Of course we're going to cry because we miss her. But what she was really saying is go on with life, enjoy life. So thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that memory. So identifying, some of the ways that you can cope. So prior to the holiday season beginning, consider creating a list, right? Create a list of go-to coping skills for you. Like, is it taking deep breaths? Is it taking a walk? Is it journaling? Is it listening to music? Is it yoga? Is it meditation? Is it saying positive affirmations? Is it calling a friend? Is it, video chatting with a friend? Create a list of coping skills before you need them, because when you need them, sometimes it's hard to think of what you need in that moment. But if you have that list on your phone, in your notes app, that it, for most of us, our phones are always with us, that you can look on. If you carry a little journal with you, designate a page in the journal and just continue to let your list grow throughout the year, so that when you need to cope, you can simply turn right to the list and find something in that moment to help you. Put a 1 in the box if that makes sense. Put a 2 in the box if it does not make sense. So sometimes it's about giving back. So volunteering or doing something charitable sometimes helps uplift us, or sometimes helps put things in perspective for us. So helping other people could possibly alleviate some of the sadness that you feel. It could bring you joy. It's never a bad idea to volunteer, or help other people out. It, for me at least, has always seemed to be a good idea to connect with organizations that do things during the holiday. And then, I keep going back to find your person. Find your person. If you have not identified a person that you can check your thinking with, that's going to be part of this reflection from this webinar, is to find someone that you can really connect with. And if you don't want to find someone, then find someone else, find a coach, find a therapist, someone that is trained in grief and loss to help you make sense of this journey, because it is a journey that we're on. The holiday season is not always as merry as we want it to be. There may be some times where it is, and then some other years where it isn't. So it's normal to feel some apprehension about it, and just know you're not alone. I mean, if I asked you guys to put 1s and 2s as we've been going through, you guys let me know. I'm not on this journey by myself. We're all traveling this road together. Yes, we're on different paths, but we are on this journey together. And so that's kind of the end. I want to know, though, are there any questions? Do you guys have any questions about anything we talked about? Do you have anything you want to share, anything that you want to say? And I'm going to bring, Philadelphia Flight back, Dr. Reader. If you can come on back and just kind of, let's chat a little bit and see what folks are saying.
Well, thank you, Armina, for that very insightful but also comforting presentation around this topic of grief and loss. And, as you were speaking, I was taking notes myself, because like you, myself, we all have grieve something or are grieving. And so I want to thank you for really talking to us about giving ourselves really permission to grieve and to be and to create boundaries for ourselves when we're around family and friends and holiday parties and things like that. But also giving ourselves permission to allow help to help by finding that person as a support when our feelings are getting to be a bit much. So thank you for normalizing that for all of us, because sometimes, I don't know about you all, but sometimes you may feel like you said earlier, you kind of losing control or losing your mind because of the grief that you may be experiencing at the time. So thank you, Armina, for that wonderful presentation. And so if you all have any questions, any thoughts, we would love to hear from you. You could put it in the Q&A box. You can express your thoughts about today's presentation. Ask Armina any questions that you may have around this topic or around her presentation. We would love to hear from you so we can answer those questions. And I thank you all also for participating in the chat with your numbers and the heart and all of that. And so that is an example of creating community when we're talking about this topic. And so thank you guys for engaging in this process as well.
Yes.
So Tiana mentioned, often people want you to be further along in your grief than you are. Grief is a process.
Yes, that is so true. And the process is for the individual, it's not for the people around us. And I truly, in order for me to not necessarily be angry with everyone, I had to create in my head that they just love me so much that they want me to be in a better place. They don't like seeing me this way, but they don't know what to do. So they kind of want me to hurry up in this process so that I can arrive. Well, I realized there is no arriving. I'm going to be on this journey. And on this journey, I'm going to have ebbs and flows. And so, yes, you're so right, Tiana. They want us to be quickly over with it or longer or further. But that's what we have control over, right? We get to control what's happening, what our feelings are. And if we're done, or if it just becomes a part of who we are. Yes, and grief is the price we pay for love. But in that time with our folks, we've had great memories that that we should keep thinking of and living. And that's why those traditions are so important, because we don't want to ever get to a place where we just move on with life as if that person never existed, and so it is a strong price we pay. But I will tell you one thing, though, I will continue to love, even knowing that grief exists. So you are right. Yes.
That's a great thought. Someone else put, I lost my medical insurance, so it's hard for me to get a therapist. I was fortunate to be selected by the Black Experience for 12 free sessions starting.
Nice.
Awesome. What do you recommend for people with no coverage?
Nice. So there are multiple places out there that will do stuff just like this, like free sessions. You just have to ask, at our firm, we do offer either whatever you can pay, right? So if you can afford to pay $10, that's what you pay. If you can afford to pay $5, $20, whatever. And there's a few slots that are available throughout the year for those types of individuals. But then there's also a place called Open Path, and you get to also pick your price and your therapist. And the therapists that are on that panel, they agree to accept whatever it is that you can afford to pay. And sometimes we think therapy is something you do every week, but maybe every week is not what you can afford, or every week is not what you do. Maybe it's every other week. So if you find a therapist that you truly feel like this person speaks to what I'm going through, and I think we would be a good fit, reach out to them and tell them what's going on with you. You just never know. The reason with our firm, we have donors too that say, hey, here's X amount of dollars to spend towards anyone who wants therapy. And so that's what we use those dollars for. So there are multiple, things out there that exist just for those reasons.
Thank you, Armina, for that information. As I was reading one of the comments, I believe, Tiana, you answered her question, her comment. It made me think about how when we're grieving, and you can probably speak to this, people don't always understand the journey that you're on, right? People do expect you to be further along. And it's unfortunately, people who don't understand may say things to further harm, cause harm statements. And I've heard this and I've seen this. You're still grieving that? That happened so long ago. And I find that sometimes people have a hard time knowing how to either respond or how to manage that emotion that comes up because of someone's lack of awareness of grief and what it means to
Excuse me. So we could do one or two things. We can use the opportunity to educate them, in terms of, this is my grief. I appreciate, where you're coming from, but I'm not like you, or I'm not where you think I should be, and I'm okay with that. And that's it, kind of like your comeback is like, okay, I get what you're saying, but for me, and then finish the sentence, or smile and walk away. Or maybe that becomes a mental note of, this is not someone that you can consider in your circle for now. Maybe there has to be, we're talking about boundaries, right? Maybe you have to set a boundary between you and that person, because if you continue to hold space with that person, it's going to pull you further into your grief. And in this journey, we're moving. We're not, you may stop, you may smell the roses, you may look at the scenery, you may take some pictures or some selfies, but you're moving. And some people will cause you to derail or go further back from where you're trying to go. So when it comes to boundaries, this is where we get to exercise it and flex it.
Thank you for that. And I hear folks ask that question often, how do you deal with that? And it's frustrating for many who are subjected to such questions about their grieving process. So thank you, Armina, for elaborating on that.
But so let me just give you the flip of that is, so my previous husband passed away in December. And in May, I met someone and I started dating. So the flip of it was like, oh, your husband is not even, his body's not even cold yet, and you've moved on.
Yeah.
So there is the flip of it as like, well, you should be grieving longer. So there there really isn't, just like I said, there isn't a one way or right way or wrong way to grieve. There's so many different avenues people will present to you about what they think should be your appropriate level of grieving.
That is so true. Thank you for your transparency. You're right. I think that just speaks to our lack of awareness about the process that's involved in the journey of healing. Really, when you're grieving, you're really healing, and we are unaware of that. So yeah, that's could be frustrating, I imagine. Right? Someone says, great advice. Sorry for all the comments. I didn't think I would be so vocal. I lost my husband in April, so this presentation is great for me.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm with you on the loss of someone very dear. Thank you for sharing that. And it's a hard thing to do, but I am here standing in front of you as someone who thought I would never be. If someone said to me the day, the month, the year he died, that, oh, in X amount of time, this is what you're going to be doing, this is where you're going to be, I would have been like, no way, because the pain was so much that I just didn't think that I could ever get over or through it. But I just learned how to maneuver life. And when I met this gentleman in May, and then we ended up getting married, there were days I called him by my previous husband's name, because it didn't just go away because I was married. And so I was just grateful that I found someone who understood my grief and understood the impact that the loss had on me, that was okay with me calling him another man's name. So I don't know, Tiana, what you're doing. If you want to connect outside of this, I would love to chat with you and see, excuse me, if there's any way that I could be of any support to you during this time. You're welcome.
Again, thank you all for hanging out with us for this webinar. It's been great information. You've also provided a space, Armina, that feels safe and people are willing to talk and share. So thank you for creating this safe space to talk. If there isn't any other questions or comments, Armina, do you mind sharing where they can find you on social media to contact you, or email, website?
So the last thing I want to share is that everyone at some point will suffer a loss. The loss of loved ones, good health, a job, anything is going to be at some point a loss to us. However, the experience, a time of feeling sort of barren of opportunities, find hope. hope is there. Even if it's a little bit, even if it's like a slither of it, find it. The important thing is to not allow yourself to be stranded on the desert, because no man is an island by itself. So I'm on social media. You can find me at info@Candor Consulting Firm. I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram. And so the company is Candor, Candar consultingfirm.com. We have a website. My phone number is 302-922-1767. And that's 302-922-1767. Thank you, Dr. Rita, for putting that out there. So it's been great hanging out with you guys. I hope you will come back, in the next couple of weeks. I will be back on the 19th. Yes, the 19th, I will be back with another one of my coworkers. And it's at that time that we're going to really talk about, is there such a thing as the holiday blues?
So don't want to miss this. You want to schedule or register for the webinars for the next 3 weeks. Next week, we will have Wynisha Foxworth from Candor Consulting Firm, who will be speaking to us on the topic of learned lessons, what we can learn from grief. Don't miss it. Be sure to tune in and register for next Monday. We will start promptly at 11 a.m.